Hello there, everybody. Welcome to our reaction here for episode 6 of Ahsoka. This is called Far, Far Away, with a wonderful opening that connects so perfectly to the idea of Star Wars is fantasy. Star Wars has always been a fairy tale. I love it. I love the connections right off the bat. But we're going to get into this. Make sure you are hitting that like button. Really helps us out. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're finding us for the first time. Subscribe. We cover Ahsoka every single week. We have a ton of stuff out there about Ahsoka. Make sure you check out all of our great content. All right, let's get into the review. And like I mentioned, Ahsoka's not really in this episode. She starts out with this really nice scene with Hu Yang about storytelling, and obviously now connecting the three parts, three histories of the Star Wars galaxy. That was a cool little tidbit. We start out with that little piece of storytelling, and that kind of takes us into now our new galaxy, seeing a place that was fabled in these stories that Hu Yang is telling Ahsoka. Very cool touch there. Let's start off right off the bat, though. Let's talk about Thrawn. We've all been waiting for Thrawn forever. One of the best Star Wars characters ever. One of the most incredible villains Star Wars has ever had. One of the most layered villains Star Wars has ever had. We finally get our first live action version of Thrawn here, or at least the first live action one that didn't appear on a cover of a book. And this is Lars Mikkelsen's debut as Thrawn, with the voice just perfect. Sanak, what were your reactions immediately when you were seeing Thrawn for the first time?
You remember in Return of the Jedi, Vader lands on the Death Star 2. Cool scene. But when Palpatine lands, but you felt it. You felt like the Emperor was arriving at the peak example of what he could do with his political Sith powers, everything that made him him as a weapon, right? Like he was on the greatest thing he could achieve as a Sith in a way without needing the Force. And that's exactly how I felt about Thrawn. This is a character, arguably, is the third greatest villain in Star Wars history, right? When he's walking out there, the stormtroopers, it says everything. Like there's like that Japanese thing called kintsugi, where like instead of like just throwing away something that's broken, you kind of patch it together with like gold paint or just straight gold, right? It's incredible. You see that on the Chimaera, and then you see that on the troopers. That Captain Enoch character with the face mask, that looks so cool, just menacing. And then something about that red cloth, like red cloth, it was like that just feels like that's the Nightsister. You already, that's all you need to know. And walking through that, I felt so much of the same way that I felt when Thrawn finally got clones in the Thrawn trilogy. I was like, okay, like now he's seriously pushed up like everything to times 10 times 11, right? Just we've only got tidbits, like when Morgan is saying like, are you sure two squads? He's like, the two of us lived here, you haven't. And I'm like, oh snap, he's already hinting at like the gravitas of the situation he's been in. So for him to survive in this new galaxy with all the odds against him, the collaborations that he's done, the connections, the beginning of his like power struggles and bureaucracy, I felt it all. I felt it all in just that opening shot. And I'm so happy because it was so easy to underplay Thrawn after how we depicted him in Rebels. You could have played him a lot more grounded, a lot more of like that rugged survivor, but we didn't. Right? We got that feeling that we had of Legends Thrawn, and it makes sense. Again, going back, the average fan knows Thrawn as like the third greatest villain in their mind in Star Wars history. So you have to feel that way. Even he's not a Sith, right? So and still not having all these answers. Just loved it.
Yeah, I mean, it was the best. It was the best shot. Like the way they did it, the way they built up to him. You see his boots walking. You see the overhead shot. You see him walking through the sides of all the stormtroopers. I mean, it was perfect. And I brought up last week. It was either on predictions or the live stream. We forget that multiple ships went to this new galaxy besides just the Chimera, and we also always think of Thrawn, Ezra. There was a whole crew of these star destroyers who went there, so it makes a lot of sense now. The cult of Thrawn kind of being built up. Obviously, we have a little bit of the cult of Thrawn idea that we had pushed in the beginning of the show, kind of debunked that it was the three mothers talking to Morgan from across galaxies more than Thrawn. So that's good that he doesn't now have force powers all of a sudden. The idea of an alien, someone who looks completely different, someone who looks very menacing, and someone who's always cool, calm, and collected, kind of taking control when all these guys were just doing their job, and now they're in a whole nother galaxy. They're panicking. They're like, what do we do? The fact that he would become a cult leader is very much so in the possibility of what would happen in this type of scenario. For 10 years, this guy is still wearing his white, pristine tunic from his Admiral uniform. And Lars Mikkelsen absolutely commands the screen for an actor who really has not gotten a chance to shine, not nearly as much as his brother, Mads, who's portrayed villains in everything. And Lars comes in and he's able to physically embody just the perfect Imperial. He's straight posture, tall, kind of looks down upon everybody. The eyes are perfect. His facial expressions, the way he gives away very few things, but you still see a little bit of that thought process going in his head. And the voice, too. The voice is absolutely perfect. It just teleported me back to Rebels. And that was the brilliance of casting him is, even though he might not look like the prototypical Thrawn that we are used to from art since the 1991, it's the voice that almost unanimously everyone agreed was perfect for Thrawn and Rebels. That carried over. Now, as soon as you hear it, you haven't heard a voice like that before. It immediately takes you back to Rebels. And I love the Stormtrooper designs. I love Captain Enoch's design. It just looks so good. That was the first big treat we got of the episode. I really didn't expect the second treat. I expected the journey to start for Ezra. I did not expect to actually find him at the end of this episode. I really thought that the Ezra plot point would get pushed until the next episode. I thought we'd probably find him around the end of episode 7, and then we would need to reunite all of our heroes to go back and stop Thrawn in episode 8. And we've already found Ezra. I mean, obviously, there's a lot Sabine hasn't told him. The fact that they can't go home, the fact that she got there with the bad guys, the fact that she really has no good news to bring him other than a familiar face. But we do get to see Ezra, and Eman Esfani looked incredible as Ezra. He looked so good. They got the eyes down too, just perfect. So, Nick, what were your thoughts now, transitioning all the way to the end of the episode when you got to finally see Ezra in live action?
They called him Space Aladdin for so long. Why not lean into it, right? He obviously had like a nice, easy transition for me and so many because he just straight up looks like the model from Rebels, like season 3, season 4. It's like that's the face that we saw without the beard and everything that we hear. How we got there felt very Rebels esque. Like, this has been a great show, but it's had its own flavor. I would say it has been firmly the Ahsoka show, right? Like when you watch it, you're like, yeah, that's cool, that's awesome. It feels very Clone Wars inspired. It feels very inspired by what Filoni discovered while doing Ahsoka and the Mandalorian episode and the Book of Boba Fett episode with Luke. This feels like Rebels again, just that interaction, just getting to these rock creature like things. Like they have they have the shells, and they're also like mini caves for them that like they could like bury themselves in. But they're like Meeber Gaskin's ancestors. That's how they felt like to me. Same head structure, everything. And that whole sequence with the ride that she has, those like kind of wolf dog things, not exactly Nexu, but like probably the closest thing that we could have. It was nuts. And they were having fun with that fact. So even the silliness, they played into that. Even if they have some serious matter to deal with. And it felt great. Like we know Sabine has all that weight on her. But we played off with this like very funny scene where we meet this Meeber Gaskin ancestors. They got their rebellion patch because they were at Ezra. It's so well tied to his character with his connection, the bridge, both literally with the original trilogy, thinking of the Force, with a little bit more of the history of the prequels and the weight of the world of the prequels. A great character that Ezra was came from his fact that he could connect to these creatures on this different planet, different galaxy, but he plays into like that child like version of him that Sabine remembers, that's in her dreams and all that, and gives us so much. It's like a little remaster of like that dynamic from Rebels. And then that's it. Now we can go into their new story. They're adults. The weight of what Sabine's done. What the hell is Ezra now, right?
Ezra doesn't appear to be any different than we had kind of seen him before. He's still the lighthearted Ezra, which in a lot of ways makes me pretty happy because we already tried to do that arc in Rebels. We already teased it with Maul. We didn't need to make him dark side again, although I would have understood it if he was a little hard nosed, a little rough around the edges since he's been surviving out here by himself for 10 years. We'll see how he reacts when Sabine tells him she has no way to actually get him home, but we know he'll end up riding the Purgle with Ahsoka and Sabine again. In general, Peridia is a really cool idea in a new planet that's going to get so much unbelievable backstory here in the future. Like the hidden gem of this show is the development for the Night Sisters, which I was not expecting at all. Nobody was expecting that when we started this show. And they've developed the Night Sisters incredibly well. And it's so cool to see them brought into live action with the face paint and all of that stuff. But I think not going to see a darker Ezra. I do think this is it. I think this is the Ezra we know. It's the Ezra who builds up to that moment where he's able to collapse the temple on his family, escaping back to help save the day on the Chimera. It's the one who is able to move beyond his attachments. And so I'm glad we're going to get to see this version, this team up. And I can't wait to hear about how he eventually separated from Thrawn. Thrawn knows where he is, but like in general, Thrawn, this has been a point I've emphasized for a long time. This is consistent with the books. Thrawn does not care about it. Like he's not going to go get revenge on Ezra. He doesn't care. As long as it helps his goal of what he's trying to do, he'll do it. But if he doesn't have any motivation, he's not going to waste his time being vengeful. So the fact that Ezra just lives down the street from Thrawn and he kind of knows where he is, but he doesn't really care, that's perfect characterization for me with Thrawn. And I think next episode, we're going to get maybe kind of a bit of backstory on their connections through the time we've seen pass and why maybe Ezra hasn't chosen to try to stop the Empire as well if they're building up on the planet. So, a lot of cool things to talk about here. Thank you all so much for joining our stream. Make sure you hit that like button and you're subscribed to the channel. If you are new, we have a ton of Ahsoka coverage coming soon. We also have predictions for episode 7, the penultimate episode already, which is kind of sad. That's going to be coming out on Friday. Check out our Rebels characters tier list if you haven't. There's also a new bracket up. It's Dark Side Power Rankings, 2 a day, every day for the next 5 days until we get through our play-in. Make sure you check out our Patreon and YouTube membership tiers. We do have a lot of cool perks there that help you interact with us more directly. If you are interested in even more exclusive live streams, there are perks on there for all of that type of stuff. Join us next week, every single Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, for the Ahsoka episode 7 discussion. I'm sure it'll be another big one. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you all next time.